Looking back, the idea for having a banking union was created and developed at the height of the sovereign debt crisis about 10 years ago. The idea based essentially on the realization that a monetary union like the Eurozone does not function properly without some form of centralization.
The ESM, Common Backstop to the Single Resolution Fund, is a significant strengthening of the financial infrastructure and the safeguards of banking union. The strengthening of the financial infrastructure with the ESM Common Backstop is a measure of preparedness and alertness. It's not a measure of being alarmed and distressed. Still, in the overall process of creating banking union, implementing it, it is also true that banks are still in the process of building up MREL, and so the bail-inable amounts that they have on their balance sheet. The process is well advanced, but we are not fully there yet. Profitability in the European banking sector, for a number of reasons, is still rather anemic. Strengthening the structure of the ESM. So, next to the common backstop, another element is that the ESM forward-looking will have a stronger role in any future program that would develop with sovereigns. In future programs, the ESM, next to the European Commission, will be looking into policy conditionality. With the introduction of the common backstop, another tool that the ESM has, which is the direct bank recapitalization instrument, that will cease to exist. We know that EDIS is still a missing backstop, still a missing leg of financial safety that makes banking union work better.
The purpose of the backstop is actually to double the resources available to support the resolution in the banking union, which are targeted at 1% of total covered deposits of all institutions authorized in the banking union. The process could only start when we receive a formal request for a loan. And this will happen once the SRB has made a decision whether there is a public interest in resolving the bank, and there are no other measures available, and we will produce jointly with the SRB the assessment of the repayment capacity, hence the assessment of the ability of the SRB to recoup the funds through ex post contributions that will be levied from the industry by the SRB itself. Another important feature is that these funds will be immediately available.
A lot of the ESM's credibility is undermined by its decision-making rules that could be impractical in crisis situation. Yeah, so every deployment has to be approved by a majority of the Eurogroup first.
It's true as a conceptual concern, but effectively in the past, when it really then was necessary, it has always worked. So that the practical experience is, in case of need, yes, you can take those decisions.
A targeted European banking solvency framework with an enhanced role for national DGS could deliver substantial benefits. So the objective of this reform should be to provide for alternative instruments for national DGS in addition to the mere liquidation, and also the strong role of Institutional Protection Scheme, IPS, in preventing banking failures in the first place should be respected.
The bail-in tool is clearly the core element of the resolution toolbox. And if we cannot get this tool, which has not been applied, to work, then the whole exercise of having a single resolution mechanism may prove unsuccessful in the long run. The composition of MREL across member states looks very different, and this applies in particular to the level of subordinated debt instruments. And I think if it's not possible to actually remove those differences, the proper and reliable implementation of the bail-in tool is likely to remain difficult for some time in the future. It will be difficult to price bail-inable debt instruments once again, and precisely because of this uncertainty, the political incentives to avoid a bail-in for member states in particular, in my view, remain incredibly high.
We know that there is a concern on how resolution insolvency will work forward-looking. Nicoletta has before said and made the point about the need for harmonization. Just to say that this is part of the political discussion, and that also has the president of the Eurogroup has made that clear on banking union is also a work stream that look at improvements of the crisis resolution framework, and question, for example, on how to deal with medium-sized banks is part of that discussion. And it is not the role of the ESM to second guess what the SRB decision. Our role is when we have received the confirmation from the SRB that the BRRD is properly applied, to take a decision on the use of our funds.
The backstop can be used for any of the purposes set forth by the regulation. This means that it can be used for liquidity provision. Of course, this comes with additional safeguards, because in most cases, if we talk about idiosyncratic crisis, the firepower of the Single Resolution Fund and the ESM backstop will be enough to provide liquidity in resolution.